still coming in, so I'll leave it a few moments. Great, we've got lots of people. Lovely to see. One moment more, just let people trickle in. Great, thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Food, Climate and COP26 webinar. I'm Chris Walker, I'm Network Coordinator for Sustainable Food Places. It looks like we are joined by from local food partnerships across the country, from the SFP network, and people from beyond SFP too, which is great. Good to see so many of you. Thank you for joining. I'm just going to start with a couple of important housekeeping points. First of all, we are recording today, and that recording will be made available on the SFP website at some point soon, just so you know you're being recorded, and then you can also direct colleagues and others to the recording if you'd like to. Please, you are muted as you come in. Please keep muted unless you really want to be heard. And we have the chat function. Please feel free to use that for comments, questions, links, etc. We will keep an eye on that, including with help from my colleague Elisa, who is helping with tech today. Thanks, Elisa. We do have time later on, plenty of time, I hope, for questions and discussion. So now for why we're here. There is obviously no time like the present for when it comes to climate action. And the task specifically of putting food and local action for a better food system at the heart of that agenda. But it's a particularly good moment to come together on this right now. We are, of course, a year away from the UK hosting the COP26 climate negotiations, postponed from 2020, like much of life. And as many of you here are already showing, it makes it a really critical point to build action, ambition, and get more vocal on food and climate and the role of food in climate action. And today we will be hearing from several speakers who help us to do that. We'll be hearing from Tom Andrews, my colleague, program leader at SFP, who will give a bit of an introduction from the Sustainable Food Places perspective and a bit of background on that, on our work on that. We have Sophie Quist from Nourish Scotland, who will tell us about the new Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration and how to get involved in that. Welcome, Sophie. And also Duncan Williamson from Nourish to talk about their Farm to Farm Dialogues project, which looks to connect local food networks with producers to work together for a just climate transition. And last but not least, Ruth Westcott from Sustain, who will tell us about the Every Mouthful Counts project that will support local food and climate action. For some of you, that will be an update on that project. Some of you have already been involved in that. For others, it will be a bit of an introduction and about upcoming opportunities to get involved. Each of these presentations are worth a webinar in itself, but we will be strict with timing and leave plenty of time for questions and discussion. So I think, first of all, I'm going to hand over to Tom. Are you there, Tom?
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. I'm afraid my eyesight's not good enough to see how many people on this call are already members of the Sustainable Food Places Network, but assuming that there might be a few that aren't, just to let you know that Sustainable Food Places is a partnership program between the Soil Association, Sustain and Food Matters, and more importantly, 55 different local food partnerships across the UK and growing. We work through what we call the SFP framework of 6 key issues, and one of those issues, key issue 6, has always been about environment, and up until sort of the end of last year, mostly what we focused on was the sort of waste agenda. But we realised more and more how important that focus on climate and nature needed to come through in the work that we're doing. So we're 1 year into a 5-year phase 3 programme, And in reflecting on the fact that a huge number of local authority areas have now declared climate and nature emergencies, we feel like it was a really important time for us to gear up a little bit on the work we're doing around food, climate and nature. So today really is about a bit of a map of the territory of a number of strands of work that we're engaged with. None of them are significantly developed, as you'll see, but we think between them, they provide a fantastic opportunity for places to get involved around this agenda. And really this for us is the start of a journey that we'll be continuing to support over the next 4 years plus. Probably not an awful lot else to say other than that I just wanted to flag that, as one of the things that Chris didn't mention is, and that we're working on as well as the other things you'll hear about today, is we, as a part of the program, we run campaigns. In the past, that's included Sugar Smart, Sustainable Fish Cities, Veg Cities, a current one. We are also now currently piloting a couple of campaigns that relate to the food and climate emergency. One is being led by Cambridge Sustainable Food, and that is about working to reduce meat and dairy consumption, working with businesses, public bodies, schools, community groups and individuals. And I think that pilot goes on till about towards the back end of next year. And there is another pilot campaign going on being led by our colleagues in Brighton Hove Food Partnership, and that one is around rethinking food waste in the terms of food use. So how do you change the kind of conceptualization of what food waste is all about and think about it as food use? So it's about incorporating the food hierarchy and thinking about how can we better use food in every aspect of where food comes from farm to fork. I think that campaign is also due to complete towards the end of next year. And one of the things that we're of course hoping is that those two things combined with some of what comes out today will lead into quite a big national campaign around food, climate and nature for Sustainable Food Places members and others. And as with all campaigns in the past, we will be including some grants around that and hopefully working together across the UK to drive forward on this agenda. So there'll be more on that probably towards the back end of 2021. That's probably all from me. So handing straight over to Sophie, is that right, Chris?
Yes, Sophie. Thank you.
Great, thanks Tom and thanks Chris. I'll just share my screen. See, get the right one. Okay, there you go. All right, perfect. Hi everyone, my name is Sophie Quist. I'm from Nourish Scotland and I'm really excited to be sharing with you our initiative, a local government initiative for COP26, the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, which is a commitment by subnational governments to tackle the climate emergency through integrated sustainable food policies and a call on national governments to act. So today I'm just going to, knowing that we're brief on time, I'm going to just take you through at a high level the kind of core issues that the declaration tackles, how it came about, what the value of the declaration is, how it fits into COP26, and how you can join and sign up. So the Glasgow Declaration, what is the value of a new declaration for COP26? The Glasgow Declaration builds on existing commitments by subnational governments, including this, the Sustainable Food Place, have already done an incredible amount of work around sustainable food policies to bring a unified message across these different coalitions and networks to COP26 that food systems are incredibly important and that local governments are incredibly important too. So it is in that sense a pledge by subnational governments of all sizes and of national governments who can sign up to tackle the climate emergency through sustainable integrated food policies. It is unique and added value in its call to action on national governments as well to align their policies with the progressive innovation that's happening at the local level. And the Glasgow Declaration has been drafted in coalition with a number of these networks of subnational policies, governments, think tanks and civil society organizations. Many of them are on this slide, though you can read more on our website as well, because I couldn't fit everyone on. Beginning of 2020, of these networks coming together and drafting the declaration, and then it has been consulted on with subnational governments over the summer and autumn, and we've gone through multiple drafts, and the final text is now available on the website. Hopefully many of you had a chance to look at it. Otherwise, we're going to be sharing the link so you can have a look at the text itself. So at the core of the Glasgow Declaration is this argument that we need a food systems approach to climate change. And the reason for that is that food systems account for around 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, it's becoming increasingly clear that we need to tackle the way we do food. However, at the international and national level, food is typically considered in different policy areas and in silos, which can result in inconsistent and at times conflicting policies, for example, conflicting priorities for land use. A food systems approach, on the other hand, considers that all these different problems in the food systems are deeply interconnected and needs to be looked at holistically. And so that without this joined up approach, climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies connected to the food system are likely to be ineffective. And that's really at the core of this call for sustainable integrated food policies in the Glasgow Declaration. So why a prominent role for local governments? The most progressive food systems initiatives, as many of you know, occur at the local level. Local governments and able to build on more democratic governance approaches, which is extremely important for a just climate transition, which my colleague Duncan is going to speak a little bit more to in a minute. However, despite that amount of progressive food system innovation that happens at the local level, local governments do not have sufficient seat at the table at COP26. And often there is misalignment in national and international policies with that local action, which can lead to a failure to support that local food system innovation and to create this enabling environment that really enables a food system transformation to be driven from the local level and up. So those are the two kind of core elements of the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, that is sustainable food policies that are integrated horizontally across different policy levels and vertically across different levels of governance. So how does the declaration fit into the architecture of COP26? At the core, this is about delivering a unified and clear message that food systems and integrated food systems approach and the voices of local actors, in particular of subnational governments, are extremely important as they hold many of the solutions to climate change and has to be part of international climate change debate. And I should add here that when we say subnational governments, this isn't restricted to cities. It is really about any subnational governments, from towns to cities to rural municipalities to devolved nations and subnational states. And the Glasgow Declaration sits within a call to really put food systems at the table at COP26 and to include food systems in the official negotiations. So within the Glasgow Declaration and around it is a call to include a food systems day in the official programme at COP26. Where the declaration will be presented and the commitments and calls of the declaration will be discussed, with a significant role for subnational governments. We don't have all the details of this yet, but we hope that many of you will join us in this call to collectively define what that day will look like and make sure that that's part of COP26. So on that, I hope that many of you will join this call and sign up to the Glasgow Declaration. The signature process is really simple. I'll go through it on the website in just a second. So far, we have around 25 subnational governments signed up supporting the declaration. I think some of you are among us. I'm really happy to announce that among Sustainable Food Places members, we have Middlesbrough and Glasgow, of course, are signed up to the declaration. And we are launching the declaration on the 14th of December, so on next Monday, with supporting statements from some of the signatories. So we'll send out an invitation to you, hopefully after this webinar as well. But I'll just take you to the website to show you how you can sign up and how you can read more about the declaration. 1 second. So hopefully, Chris, can I have a thumbs up that you're seeing the website? Is that all good? Perfect. So on the signature process, you go to the glasgowdeclaration.org website, and we've got a form here that you can fill in saying which government you represented, your position, and a contact detail. And we'll then, myself from Neuro Scotland or our colleagues at IPES Food who co-lead in this project will get in touch with you to confirm your signature. From the 14th, when we launch the declaration, we'll be listing all the signatories on the website as well. So you'll get to join the, I guess, of the governments that's signing up. But what we want is to be able to say that the council or the city government has signed up to the declaration. So hopefully this will come through the council leader, and there will have been the relevant formal process for ensuring that that's a legitimate endorsement. I hope that answered that question, but feel free to ask clarifying points on that if not.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Do also feel free to shout out as well if you are not on camera. Just a question from, have we outlined the process of how Glasgow and Middlesbrough got support with signing? I don't know if that's something our Glasgow and Middlesbrough colleagues here to give a bit of perspective on that, or maybe Sophie can. Thanks, Sue. Let's just see, I'm trying to see if we have Middlesbrough or Glasgow.
Yeah, Chris, Joe from Middlesbrough.
Oh, hi, Joe.
Hi there. When the information was sent through to me via email from Tom, I distilled it a bit and then presented that to our mayor, and also outlined how we felt that we were well on the way towards this, and that it was the food action plan and the other work that's happening in Middlesbrough supported the declaration and vice versa. So he immediately sort of said, absolutely, this is what we need to be doing. And so I then went through the process again with his PA to ensure that, that he was happy with the sign up and supporting him through that. So that's how we did it, by using the information that was already sort of available about the declaration.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe. It's helpful.
Thanks. Perhaps if I can comment on that, just to say that our contact details for myself and for our colleagues at IPES are on the website, and we're very open to have to answer any questions about the signature process, including if you have more kind of deeper questions about the declaration that you'd like a discussion on. We really want this process to be very inclusive. So that's an open invitation to get in touch and ask any questions.
Great. And a question from Emily as well. Is there a suggestion that councillors should be asked to bring a motion asking a council to sign up as part of this process in areas where councils aren't involved? If so, is there a draft motion to support this, I guess? Sophie?
So, I mean, I think that would be fantastic. We do not have a draft motion. We do have a draft letter for governments and for mayors that we've been sending internationally. I imagine that we would need to adjust this to specifically for UK councils. And that's definitely something we can look into, probably together with Sustainable Food Places, if that's helpful to have a draft motion. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to support that on the SFP programme too. So yes, great. Thank you for that suggestion. I don't think we.
Can I just ask another question, Hello? That's really interesting. I've been out of the loop a little bit recently, so I just wanted to know where the seed of this came from. Like, you know, you've got so many people engaged in it. Sort of, who was the main driver of this? I just like the context. I might have missed an obvious. Sorry. Do you know what I mean? So, is it Glasgow?
So this really was, I think, a lot of different networks coming together to say, okay, we need a unified message to go to COP. So it's been driven. I mean, we've been convening the process at Nourish Scotland and IPES Food, which is the International Panel on Sustainable Food Policies. They're based in Brussels. But from the beginning, ECLAI, the Under 2 Coalition, Sustainable Food Places, and others who are kind of networks of national governments and Glasgow City Council have been involved. Perhaps Pete, I don't know if you'd feel happy to add anything to that initial context of the Glasgow Declaration.
Yeah, sure. It's probably a bit fairer, Sophie, because it sort of started before you're even at Nourish. But in terms of the speed, obviously we were expecting COP to be a year earlier, so we started on this some time ago, and it's just been a fairly slow, so there was quite a lot of talks at the beginning, but Kath was involved from the very first meeting we had at Chatham House with Tim Benton and people. And I think it just sort of happened that it landed at a time when quite a lot of other international networks were thinking, oh, what do we do about COP? And obviously with the UN Food Systems Summit happening in 21 now, there's a sort of, the stars are aligning around this idea. I think what we're really pleased about is that it's very much a joint effort between existing networks of subnational governments, including Sustainable Food Places and your partners in Spain. And, so very much the intention is not to sort of supplant any of that, but to build on the networks that we have. And hopefully, during this year, there'll be lots of different opportunities for the declaration to get airtime. But at the end of it, we end up with a stronger alliance between the different city networks around the issue of food systems.
Excellent. Thank you. It's just good to have that context. It kind of gives you more strength to your argument. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And thanks, Sophie. I think we'll move now on to Duncan, also from Nourish Scotland, on the Farm to Farm project, supporting connections between producers and local food networks. Over to Duncan.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris. Lovely to be here this morning. Yes, I'm just going to give you a quick whistle-stop tour of the Fork to Farm dialogues that we're doing as a sort of the flip side of the coin to the Glasgow Declaration. And hopefully be able to be available for any questions afterwards. So the Fork to Farm dialogues, in a nutshell, we're looking to have a minimum of 20 local farmer city dialogues in different locations globally between now and August 2021. There'll be sort of a multi-stakeholder dialogue between city representatives and farmers at COP26, which will build on the outcomes of the Fork to Farm dialogues. And we're going to have it in Glasgow in November 2021. And the fundamental view that we have, our belief behind it, is change happens locally, and that local actors are best informed about what can and cannot be done. So what we're thinking, what we recognise is subnational governments worldwide are increasingly seeking to take local action on climate and nature emergencies. They're setting their own climate goals and developing joined up, and we want them to, they're setting their own climate goals and starting to develop more joined up policies on food and farming. But these will impact both on farmers' lives and livelihoods. But farmers are often not part of the conversation. And while many farmers see the need for change, they do require to have supportive policy and fair returns for their product. They need to be involved in the conversation, and they need to be engaged with local authorities and with the people who live in the cities. The problem is long supply chains at the moment mean farmers can feel disconnected from their local population, from local governments, and from their nearest cities. And we really believe that there's a need to build trust between the urban and rural actors in food systems to enable us to enact a meaningful change. So the idea is the Fork to Farm dialogues are going to connect the two ends of this change. The people in the city and region will need a reliable and sustainable supply of food, and farmers in that area will need sustainable livelihoods. So we really do need to bring them together, recognising that cities and farmers need a just transition to a future where food and farming is part of the solution and not part of the problem, as it is often perceived to be now. We recognise that there are creative and collaborative local solutions with city and farmers will build mutual understanding, synergies, and working together. They can make the necessary change locally, and they can inspire transformation globally. So the starting point for our work here is the assumption that cities and farmers feel the way that we do around food and farming. They recognise the need to change and the need to connect it to climate change, nature and the health emergencies. So fundamentally, what we believe with the Fork to Farm dialogues is we have to answer the question, how can we help each other? Because we want to build relationships for change. Relationship building does take time. The dialogues are not a one-off meeting, but are going to be a series of equitable, local-led dialogues. And as well as being local dialogues, they're going to be part of a global family of dialogues with the same principles at their core. And these principles that I'll go into later will guide the whole dialogue process. So we do see a local dialogue is going to be part of a global conversation, and we're having conversations throughout the world in India, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, I know Nicaragua, Ecuador, out Europe, we've got some in Barcelona going on. So these dialogues are going to be global dialogues with a local framework. And we think it's really important that the global family will be working on these same principles and will be part of a global community of local dialogues that leads to a global dialogue at the UN Climate Change Summit in Glasgow. And this dialogue in Glasgow will represent all the voices that we're going to have over the next sort of 6 to 9 months. So we have 3 objectives and outcomes as part of this. The first is a horizontal space for farmers and cities to share knowledge, increase awareness of each other's challenges and aspirations, and build trust and local partnerships that help to ensure a just transition. And the concept of building trust is absolutely key to what we're looking at here. The second is we will co-produce material, including examples of partnerships between farmers and cities for healthy and sustainable food systems, and descriptions of diverse farming systems that produce our food. And these will be shared locally, nationally, and at COP26 for others to utilise. And finally is we are going to have collected and transferable learning about how to conduct effective city farmer dialogues in different contexts and their added value. And again, this will go beyond the dialogue, so other people can pick up on them, and hopefully will create an environment for these conversations going forward, way beyond COP, into other landmarks and other areas. And this isn't about driving policy change. It really is about having these dialogues and creating relationships between these different groups, local authorities, cities and farmers, so they can start working together, they can build trust. So the starting point for the Farm to Fork dialogues are for farmers and city representatives to get together. Cities and farmers are being used here as a shorthand for a range of actors at subnational government level. So it's the city, it's the county, the district, the municipality, the devolved authority, the province, the state. There's many areas it could be. Cities are big cities, so the size of London, maybe even the size of Mumbai, but they can be towns. They can be an urban area where it's lots of villages connected together, but who have got the same central farming community that can serve them and work with them. And for primary food producers, we're including small and large scale crop and animal producers, irrespective of their current approach to producing food, irrespective of the method they use for producing food. Farming is a very broad scope, and we have to get all the participants engaged on this and talk to them about how we can all work together. There will be local hosts, there will be facilitators, and there will be dialogue participants who will work together on this. And we're going to be trying to answer some core questions that we've sort of identified at the beginning of these conversations. So the questions will be something: what are the main agricultural systems within you? What is the climate like, and how will it impact on farming? How will you define the region that is the locality of your fork to farm? These will all be different, these all have different answers, but we believe by having the same fundamental questions underneath it, it enables us to create a framework. we're going to go into questions like, what is the size and relative wealth of the region? What capacity do people have to host or facilitate a dialogue? How do the fork to farm dialogues fit in with existing projects? What would you hope to achieve? What would be the long-term impact of your project? We have a whole range of project questions like these, and they're designed to work out what we can do for the best with these dialogues. But also it is to make sure that these dialogues are relevant to the local situation. They don't create an extra level of administration, another level of burden, more meetings. We're trying to make sure they work within existing frameworks as well, and they can be supportive and that they are participative. So when we're looking at the fork to farm dialogues, we've got some key guiding principles within these. So the guiding principle.
Could I just give you a 2-minute? I'm giving you a 2-minute nudge.
Yeah, no problem. So the guiding principles for this are just transition and respect for human rights. We also believe in diversity. They should include everyone that you could. It doesn't matter what the age, gender, geography, ethnicity, farming knowledge systems that people are working within, they should all be part of it. We're also looking at equity and equal participation, respect for different farming and knowledge systems, underpinned by sustainability and resilience. And finally, they will be local led and context specific, feeding into a global dialogue. And the last bit I'll say is, in the UK so far, we're having conversations in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Bristol, Sheffield, London and Glasgow, and we're looking for more dialogues within the UK to feed into this process. And we're hoping that some of you will be interested in joining us in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Duncan. I know that this issue reflects a lot of interest among the SFP networks about getting local producers more involved across the food issues that we work on. Just for one clarifying question now, I think we'll move on to Ruth in a minute, but in terms of how to get involved and kind of scoping conversations about how places represented here might get involved with the project, is it best to get in touch with you directly, Duncan?
Yeah, drop me a line, and also you can reach out to Sophie as well, but I'm the main contact for the UK, so yeah, reach out, give me a call.
If you're happy to share your contact details via the chat so people can follow up on that. I'm sure that there's time for more questions on that broader topic after Ruth, I think, but I think we'll head straight over to Ruth now to hear about an update of the Every Mouthful Counts project, which Ruth is working very closely with the SFP team on to really support local authorities and others through the issue of climate and food action. So over to Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, and nice to see so many familiar faces. Thanks especially for the Christmas backgrounds for Zoom. I sort of hadn't thought about that, but I think as of this week, it's all going to be about Christmas backgrounds. Right, let me just share my screen and I will talk you through, and I will begin. There we go. So where to begin, really? Well, my name's Ruth Westcott and I work at Sustain on climate change and also on fish. And together with the Sustainable Food Places Network, we've been working on what we're calling a toolkit, the Every Mouthful Counts toolkit, which is aiming to help to deliver some climate change related food actions from local authorities. And I know what you're thinking, another toolkit, is this really going to be what solves the climate and nature crisis? But bear with me, because I think there are some very good reasons for having this approach at this point. We've been working on this for a few months now, and this is the first time that we've ever actually talked about it in a public forum like this. So I'm pretty excited. Do drop questions in the chat, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the network thinks. So the background to this has come because I just finished a piece of work where I basically analysed all of the climate change action plans that have been published by UK local authorities. It's about 90, and I read them all and looked at how well they covered food. And this might not come as much of a surprise to many of you, it was quite bad. Of the ones that I analysed, only about a third mentioned food in any way that could be considered meaningful. So 2/3 missed out food, and then only about 13, which is less than 10% or so of the ones that I analysed, we considered to be sort of good enough considering the emergency. And then you've also got this chunk, which is about 50% of all the councils in the UK, which are in this position where they have declared a climate and nature emergency, but they haven't released an action plan. So what are we trying to do through this toolkit? Well, the first is on a pretty basic level to raise awareness about what councils can do on food that might make an impact on climate change. And that is really to target this group that have declared, because they're in the process of drafting their action plans, and they due to come out in the next months to years. We want to improve, obviously, as well as raising awareness, we want to actually get some action from councils and to make the clear case that food can make a very important contribution to local climate emissions targets. And then we want something that will help to nudge and or sort of monitor and push for improvement. We are in a climate and nature emergency after all. We don't want to just present the solutions. We want to be doing something which nudges. So let's see, right. So this is what we've sort of visioned as what the landing page of this toolkit might look like. And as you can see, it's kept quite simple. There's 5 overall action areas that a council can work on food, creating policies, land, food waste and resource efficiency, sustainable food catering and citizens' diets, and then supporting businesses and enterprises. And those, you can see we're basically putting some big numbers against those 5 action areas. So if you're a council that's really at the beginning of the journey on this, you can see, look at that, 10,000 potential carbon savings from working on procurement. And that then allows you to put that into the context of the other conversations that you might be having about cycle lanes, insulating people's homes and so on. And we then have a map which would allow you to click and find out what's going on in your local authority, which I'll come to later. So, and this is from I've got to give a shout out to 4 Paws, because that's where I nicked this design from. It was very nice looking. If you're not aware of their website, it's very good. Okay, so the idea is that you would click through to one of those large action areas, and each of those has a list of actions that come underneath that area, and there's roughly 8 for each action area, and the actions would be listed in a way that's fairly simple and straightforward. The idea being that somebody who's not very food policy orientated would be able to clearly understand what that action would look like and how it can be delivered locally. And then each one of these could have a little drop down where there would be more information there and links. And ideally, we would be linking out to other organisations and other campaigns that are working in this area that would be able to take you to more information. This isn't supposed to be the place where everything is stored. It's to link out to other assets. And you can see the exciting bit here is at the below, where we have at the bottom, where for these larger ticket actions, in some cases, there's the opportunity to add the carbon equivalent savings that would be possible for different actions. So it's not saying your council will save this number of tonnes by taking this action. It's saying, here are some numbers which can allow you to make those calculations locally should you wish. So it's giving an indication, but it's not designed to be a carbon calculator. And obviously there we've got the co-benefits, and we would list those. We could use icons, or we could list them. And in some cases, actually, there's pretty good numbers for the co-benefits around jobs and so on. So it makes sense to put some numbers in there where we can. And then we could also list the number of councils that are taking action, because that just helps with nudging. It helps to councils to see that they're kind of other people are taking action. And we can also link to case studies. So to come back now to what I said at the beginning, which was the map, What we'd also like to do is create a dashboard for local authorities to allow them to be able to record their own progress against this action plan. So what you would be able to do is, as a council, you would be able to input your own progress against the plan using this some kind of little tick, you know, this classic sort of ticks and in progress, and then, you know, you've got your not started at the bottom. You can then list the actions complete and those in progress, and you have a way of the council being able to report on and record progress over time. I just wanted to draw your attention to a few bits that are, I think, quite interesting in this kind of dashboard. The first is, it says, as it says, information submitted by Camilla Community Food Partnership. So although this is about a council, there's no reason why a community-led organisation couldn't input this data on behalf of the council. If you were in a situation where you felt like there wasn't a good partnership between the council and a local organisation, they could take responsibility for doing this. Obviously, there would have to be somebody that would take responsibility, and that's why we would name them here. There's also the option of adding little case studies and stuff there. And what I just wanted to draw you to as well is, there's been quite a lot of discussion behind the scenes about whether this would work as a sort of carbon calculator or a tool to be able to sort of measure councils off against each other. And our feeling is that because of the nature of carbon numbers and food, it's just not, the data just isn't there for us to be able to create that kind of league table of who, you know, who's doing best and how we can measure. It's just not really, it's not the, it doesn't lend itself well enough to a robust ranking system. So, but there would be a way, if you were a citizen of this council, of going into this page and being able to understand, obviously you'd understand roughly how much progress your council's making, but you wouldn't necessarily know the carbon. That's not designed to be calculated. However, there is an option. A few people have said that they would be interested longer term where we do have robust numbers. So for things like removing the amount, you know, switching to less but better meat in school meals, for example, there may be an option to do something which is a little bit more robust in terms of carbon figures. And then we might be able to give some kind of an overall carbon saving at the top for different councils and compare them against sort of an average council. So that's something we might be able to look at in the future. One last quick thing before we go to questions. Would this be a league table? As I've said, the answer is no. Technically, it would be possible for you to go into the different dashboards of the different councils, look at the number of complete and in progress measures, and make your own assessment in the same way that the Sustainable Food Places Network has bronze, silver and gold. It's not a league table, but there's a differentiator there between the way that different councils are achieving. But it's not presented as a league table. I suppose that's the best way to sum it up. Great. I think I will leave it there and take questions.
Great, thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing screen. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ruth. Yeah, and thanks also to the several people here and elsewhere in the SFP network who, over quite a few months, but particularly in the last few weeks, have been helping out with some detailed input about how this might work within their local context relating to their locality, but also the form of the local authority that they work within or work with. That's really helped us think about how this tool, which we hope will be really flexible, can be used across the network and beyond. So maybe whilst they're maybe fresh in people's minds, do people have questions specifically for Ruth, and then we can broaden it out to questions about the broader topic?
I saw a lot of questions coming in, but they were mostly about wanting to live in Kamala Harris Shire.
Yeah, there's strong support for the idea of Kamala Harris Shire, which I also am keen on too. So if you could make that happen, that would be great.
Emily O'Brien.
Thanks, Ruth, and thanks for presenting that. It looks really useful, and particularly welcome if there is some way we can quantify carbon saved through food, because I'm so aware that because it's missed out of so many tools around climate action, all types of food action, just because there aren't any measurements anywhere. It's really under measured compared to, say, doing things around energy efficiency in homes and, you know, decarbonising housing stock and those sorts of things. I just had a bit of a question about whether about the sort of framing around it, which is around. It seemed like, although you've described it as a set of actions for people to take, it seemed to be more like the places people want to get to, almost like the outcomes. So even under quick wins, something like protecting allotments and community spaces, I suppose it doesn't say how you would do that. Do you mean through the planning system? Is it? It didn't really feel like a set of actions to me. So I didn't know whether there was going to be another kind of set of actions below that. It felt more like a set of, well, not all of them, some of them were actions, but some of them felt like outcomes more, you know, places you want to get to. And I just thought that would make it quite difficult to use in practice, because it wouldn't make it clear what you're actually going to a council and asking them to do. I suppose that was one thing. And the other thing was just to say, I think you're right, it'd be very difficult to use this as some sort of league table. Because, for instance, if there's something about increasing land available for agroecological farming, that's something that's simply not going to be within most councils' gifts. Most councils don't own any land that could be used for that. Only kind of certain county type councils, or possibly some unitaries, but most districts, boroughs, certain, you know, wouldn't really be able to do that. Or you know, arguably, I suppose you could talk about urban food growing or stuff, but do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not lots of those actions. And also around procurement, lots of councils don't really do much food procurement. They don't have a school meals service or anything like that. They don't. So I suppose it was just to ask how you're going to break it down so that it's clear what the asks are and what councils actually need to do.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It is a bit deliberate that it's outcomes based for two reasons. One is because if we want to put carbon numbers next to something, it needs to be related to what has changed, not how you got there. So that sort of is how it's been presented. What we would aim to do is, also because there's very little text there at the moment, but what we would do is have these drop downs. So you would say the outcome is protect community food growing spaces. You would drop down and it would say, you would go about achieving this by, for example, planning, regulation, whatever, so that we would be more descriptive about what the process is in that drop down. The second question was about, oh yeah, so it's not all relevant to everybody, different councils, different information. Yes, that's true. It's true, yeah. So, and the preamble, basically, we need to say we accept that different councils will have different responsibility for different. You've got district councils and parish councils that don't do any for procurement, for example. A lot in the future, if we can, we could have some kind of selector for type of councils, which would highlight the core responsibilities of different types of councils. And that's something that we could look at. And I would be interested to hear how whether people would find that very useful. It's interesting because we do need to be ambitious and say, oh, well, even if you only do a little bit of procurement, it's still really important that you change the food in your meetings and conferences and events and have an impact on festivals in your area and so on. So yeah, it's going to be a balance between keeping them in there so that it's ambitious and really clear that we expect action, but also making it clear that different councils have got different responsibilities and opportunities.
Thank you, Ruth. I just also want to flag that Emily has helpfully shared a link to the fantastic infographic that Brighton and Hove Partnership have put together about why include the food in climate action. And Emily says that, welcome to use it. Obviously, please credit Brighton and Hove Food Partnership. Yeah, we had a question, one about the ability to tailor it for local suitability, which I know you and we've been thinking about. So any more thoughts on that, as well as just some background on the data used for measuring carbon that you've drawn on?
Sorry, Chris, did you, I think I answered the one about local suitability. Yeah, I think in the drop down that would also be something that would be in the drop downs as well. So it would say urban areas might find there's more opportunity with community food growing. Rural areas, it's more about land, that kind of thing. So that's where all that kind of nuance would come in. It just got very, very busy in a PowerPoint.
Sure.
References and sources for the carbon, yes. So again, yeah, it would have got incredibly messy if I'd put all that in the slideshow, but it would be clickable and you would go through to a section where it had all of the links to the carbon calculator. And you'll notice I didn't put carbon calculations next to everything. If there isn't robust, we just miss it out. We just put a, data not available. We'll only put those carbon numbers in there where there's good science to back it up. Otherwise it starts to get a bit difficult to justify.
Great. Thank you. With Tom, I think you have something to probably follow on from that.
Yeah, I just thought it was worth throwing in there, and Pete might want to follow, or Sophie might want to follow up on this. It was interesting that Nourish did organise a call amongst a range of international partners around the issue of indicators in this space. And I think, as with so many conversations previously, the conclusion is it is difficult, and I think everyone should recognise that what we want to do here is support Sustain getting something out there, but it will be certainly something that needs to continue to evolve. And actually, hopefully, this sort of thing will be a real driver to looking at what indicators do work, which ones are robust, where are they comparable, and all those sorts of things. But we do recognise that it's a fraught area, which is why it's not included in any of the international agreements, because no one agrees exactly what what the carbon impact is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, it's a part of the reason, I think, to give councils the benefit of the doubt. Part of the reason it hasn't been included in so many action plans yet is because it feels too difficult. Councils aren't exactly sure what their powers are, and there aren't the numbers out there to help them to make those comparisons between reducing meat in school meals and insulating homes and hydrogen buses and all the rest of it. And so this is an effort to try to take a step towards that being better done, so that we're using the same language and the same kind of approach that is in other carbon kind of other areas like energy.
Great. And just a question from Kathy Derrick about when this will be available.
Good question, Kathy. Okay, so the next stage is going to be we're finishing off. We got some really helpful feedback from the network about the actions themselves and wording and all that stuff. So we're now just processing that, and I think the next step will be that we'll develop it, and it'll be a development and getting it on the website. So it will be the new year for sure. I think we're looking at sort of end of January, beginning of Feb, but I'll update more on that when we know how it's going to work technically. So sorry, I can't be too specific, but
I know that Ruth and us on the SFP team would really welcome conversations where you talk, if you wanted to talk through your plans, ambitions around climate work, and about how this could be applied within your project, and any way it could be adapted to support those needs too. So please do feel free to get in touch to sort of talk through the work you are doing on climate and how this might apply, or what other tools what might be needed. Yeah, so do we have any other questions, maybe for Ruth, for Duncan, for Sophie, or for us on the SFP programme? Do wave a Zoom hand or a real hand, or shout outs. We've got one from Jane, thank you.
In terms of I'm very interested in the farming side of it. So in terms of the Soil Association itself, there must be, well, there is a load of stuff going on there. I mean, is there something that can come from the Soil Association itself that's working with farmers to match this document that Ruth has been telling us about? Because I'm aware, for example, in the Silver Planning Tool, that it looks like farmers are being dictated. The tone is we're telling farmers what to do, which is clearly not the case. And I just wondered if there's some way of putting the farming side together with the food side, if you like.
Tom,
you're probably best placed to answer that one in terms of links with Soil Association.
Well, I might ask also James to reflect on this, but so Jane, there is, if you read the accompanying document to the Glasgow Declaration, there is lots of reference there to the sort of farming side of things and the need for a transition towards agroecology, which of course is at the heart of the Soil Association 20 to 30 strategy. I think the dialogues really kind of reflects the fact that we need to open a really robust conversation with producers around what this looks like and the challenges and the issues that they confront in that. I had a very long conversation with guys at DERA in Northern Ireland, and they were reflecting on how it's very difficult for farmers to feel like they're being told what they need to do without any sort of, you know, how does that work commercially and all those sorts of things. And I think we do need to be sensitive to that. There are, if you, and I'm sure Ruth will be happy to share the tool, there are some references to sort of practical and supportive ways that councils can work around this agenda. For example, providing training to producers and other farmers and growers around more cost-effective but also low input and agroecological techniques and those sorts of things. But I think this is something also we haven't done an awful lot yet to connect this much more widely into the Soil Association, but we will be making sure as this tool evolves that it's informed by our colleagues who work in the farming part of the organisation, just to make sure that we're as sensitive to those issues as possible. James, is there anything you would want to add to that?
Well, only to say, Jane, I'm sure you're aware of this, but for everyone else perhaps, it's a really interesting inflection time for UK farming at the moment, because we're coming to the end of the Common Agricultural Policy, its potential replacement by the Environmental Land Management Scheme, which is built, and there is lots more detail that we don't know about that scheme yet, but it's built on rewarding public goods. You know, starting to emerge of what those public goods are. Well, I think the point about indicators is just as interesting on the farming side. So we're just kicking off an initiative which will be available to all farmers at the Soil Association, which is about coming together against a common indicator set for broadly speaking agroecological farming. There are multiple indicators at the moment for some of those areas of delivery, like soil health, like biodiversity, like clean water, and so on. And there's a real need for standardization. So when Ruth was talking a bit about every mouthful counts, and the fact that that's struggling a little bit on the indicator front, it was making me think of the exact parallel challenge on the production side. But really trying to bring together the Soil Association in terms of its farming work over the next 10 years or so is really going to try to bring together and support all farmers to make that transition, and as part of that, help bring together an indicator set around it and connect that indicator set into market opportunities, whether that be through the ELM scheme or the markets that are starting to open up for agricultural based outputs around carbon, around carbon sequestration, around biodiversity, and so on. So that area of indicators and metrics really important. Now, as to how local authorities we can connect into that, I think it's a really interesting question. And that as one of the partners in SFP, that might be one of the things we could start to think about, Tom, over the next 5 years or so. How can we collect local authorities into the work that farmers are doing in their catchments around the transition to agroecology? So that's I think a really interesting space. So yeah, hope that's useful.
Can I just also add to that, Ruth, I think it's a really important point that particularly within that land use and planning section of the tool, that we make sure that we are sensitive to and explore the issues that these things raise for people working in that space, and that it's not just a sort of presentation to councils and an engagement with them, but also thinking about how to engage with farmers about how this would land. I'm not sure how we do that, but maybe we could take that offline and talk about how the Soil Association might help facilitate that a bit.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Can I see any hands raised, waved, or shout outs?
Chris, Emily has a question.
Emily.
Sorry, I feel I'm being a bit greedy with the questions today, but I just, if no one else is asking, can I just ask
sure,
a quick question? So just a quick question for Douglas, because there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, today about engaging with farmers. And I know Douglas said in his presentation around, you know, needing to engage with farmers on these agendas, which I absolutely agree with. But I know that we've been, you know, trying to engage farmers on some of these agendas for years, and sometimes it's quite difficult. You know, we need farmers to be in the room. Farmers don't always see their need to be in the room, and obviously that's not all farmers. I think, you know, clearly there's people like the Soil Association have links with specific cohorts of farmers, but in terms of the kind of mainstream farmers in our areas, they're not necessarily part of that. Oh, sorry, it's not Douglas, it's Duncan, isn't it? I do apologise, I'm rubbish with names. I'm so sorry, Duncan. So I was just wondering, it sounds like you've found a way to get those farmers in the room, because we all know we need them in the room to have those conversations with them. Can you set out what mechanisms you've found for making that happen? How you've done that?
I mean, some of the things that are helping is our partners in some of the dialogues to date are coming from the farming community or represented by farmers. So the Food Farming and Countryside Commission is run by Sue Pritchard, who's a farmer in Wales, and they're leading the dialogues in Wales and Northern Ireland. So there's already a level of trust amongst farming communities. It's farmers who are leading the sort of the outreach to them. It also helps with at Nourish Scotland, our founder Pete Ritchie, he's a farmer. So it helps, and we found when we go out to farmers, they're open to talking to people with that experience first. They don't, as we know, no one likes being sort of told what to do. They were looking for people with neutral experience. The other thing is our framing. We're not saying that any particular farming system is good or bad. What we're saying is we need all the farmers to be involved there. We're going to listen to farmers, big, small, you know, livestock farmer, arable farmer, whatever. They're all part of the conversation, because there will be a whole swathe of different farming practices within the dialogue area you're going to have it in, whether it's Gloucestershire or feeding London or Bristol. And so we're doing that. And then it's when we're looking, we will help the host reach out to different farming groups, but sometimes there'll be the farming groups that want to host the dialogue, which makes it very handy for us if we can get the host to be a farmer. But if not, we've got great contacts, and I'm more than happy to work with the host and the facilitator to go out to whether it's the National Farmers Union or the leaf farmer representative in the area, or we've got the Soil Association already involved with this. So it is a case of actively going out to them. And we are framing it quite clearly that this is about their future as well, and how they can work with the local authorities and make sure their voice is heard by the local authorities. Because one of the things we have found often is one of the reasons farmers are disengaged is because no one's going out to talk to them. And when they do try to work out who to talk to, it's almost impossible to get their foot in the door because they're not a usual stakeholder in these discussions. So we're going to try and help overcome that. And it will sometimes take, say, your local authority or your host to actively go out and engage on the farmers' issues, to say why they need to be part of it, to understand that for a farmer it could be they're more interested in harvest, they're all more interested, I know, with the local planning regulation and how that's impacting on them, with how the agriculture bill might be trying to encourage hedgerow restoration, agroforestry, or change their income. And it's how can we work with them to be part of that discussion as well and understand their issues. But Pete might have something else to say.
Pete, do you have anything to add to Duncan there?
I'm just going to jump in because I think Pete's actually had to drop out of the call, so
okay, sure.
Silent. But I think in terms of sharing the mechanisms that we're engaging the folk to farm dialogues, that really sums it up, Duncan. And I just to echo Emily that question has been a recurring one, I think, in our, so we've been co-designing the framework of these dialogues with the various partners, not just in the UK but also across the world. And that thing about, you know, how do we avoid fatigue of participants who are asked to contribute to loads of places but are also running farms, and how do we make sure that this isn't a sort of now you need to talk about these issues. And I think Duncan, I think Duncan elaborated really well of actually this is about listening in the first place and finding out what is really important and what motivates the participants, and make that an essence of the dialogue as well.
Great, thank you. I just want to flag that Lucy has shared a link to the fantastic report on procurement, which does touch on obviously issues around climate, but also the work of connecting with local producers around procurement issues. That report was led by Food Futures in Manchester and Foodwise in Leeds. Really worth a read with some recommendations around that, particularly supporting producers. So yeah, thanks for that link, Lucy. If any are just doing another check for questions, please do shout out. I'll give you a moment. Great, thank you. Please, as I said before, one thing that we'd really love to hear about on the SFP programme, and I know that Ruth would within Sustain as well, is just to hear more about your ideas and plans and ambitions around climate work within food partnerships and other networks that you're working with, so we can understand what ambitions and work is emerging locally, so that we can better support that, particularly as I say, there's no time like the present, but particularly over the coming year, as we've got such a good opportunity to highlight local food work within the climate agenda. So even if it's a conversation where you don't have a clear ask of us right now, then we'd really love to hear more about your work. And also, if you would like to speak to other people in the network who you think might be doing interesting work, we would happily link you up. And this will not be our only online space within the coming year on climate. We will have further opportunities for updates from the network and beyond, and the organisations here about opportunities for action. So unless our speakers have anything else to say, Sophie does.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that I've put a link to the Eventbrite for the launch of the Glasgow Declaration in the chat for everyone. So that's being launched on Monday, as I mentioned in the presentation, and in the afternoon. And just to highlight that the speakers include signatories, so that's Barcelona, Milan, Glasgow, New Haven in the US, Surakarta in Indonesia, and hopefully a speaker from Quito as well. And we'll be sending out more information about that, but it would be great to see as many of you as possible at the launch. Really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. And Tom?
Well, it was just to say it was brilliant to hear that Middlesbrough and Glasgow are already signed up. I know there's a lot of interest around this, around the declaration across the network. As with all things, I think this is about critical mass. So, you know, if you can, and if we can help in any way in getting your council signed up to this, if we can hit 20 or 30 places across the UK, I think we'll start to build a snowball and it will really roll. And if we can combine that with that happening internationally, there's a real opportunity, I think, to get a very strong voice into that COP26 space. You know, I'm imagining that hundreds of cities across and other local authorities across the world will sign up to this. And that gives a lot of power when we're trying to make the case next year or in the run up to next year.
Great, thank you, Tom. Okay, I think we will wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll hope to see you again soon. I think the speakers and I will loiter in the Zoom space for a moment, just in case anyone wants to chat to us in a smaller group as people go. But thank you so much, and see you all soon.
And a very early happy Christmas.
Yeah, early happy Christmas, and tidying up the end of 2020, however we do that.